All right. Welcome to Steo Psych. I'm Stephen Downey, a clinical psychologist. Today we're in another race against time episode as essentially I had to book a client on my lunch break, which gives me a straight, basically back-to-back rest of the day. I've got about 20 minutes somewhere for lunch, and that's not long enough to do this. So, all right. I'm going to look for one that I want to do because in the interest of time, I'm going to try and pick something that isn't too long. Am I an asshole for being pissed? My wife never told me she promised to be her cousin's surrogate. Okay, that looks hectic. So potentially, yes. Or that one. By the rules, we should be doing the top one, which essentially is this one here. Now, I think we've done something very similar to this in the past. I'm going to skip that one. Won't be stressed out because I won't be married to her. Please don't do relationships like this. That's rough. Okay. All right. Am I the asshole for wanting to divorce my postpartum wife? Okay, I'm going to read this through and offer some thoughts. It's a little bit long, but let's see if we can do it. All right. Am I the asshole for wanting to divorce my postpartum wife? It is stupid to think I'm at this point, but here I am. My STBX wife, I don't know what that means, and I have wanted kids for years, and we're thrilled when she finally got pregnant last year. From day one, I wanted to be the most supportive husband and future father I could. Her father was never involved in her life. I used to work as a tech in labor and delivery, and my brother, to put it kindly, is not the most involved father. I saw too many problems up close when it came to lacking husbands, and I'd be damned if I made the same mistakes. The problem is roughly 4 weeks into her pregnancy, everything started to go downhill. She stopped wanting sex. Fair enough, hormones and stress make that a problem. I went full stop. But then she didn't want any physical interaction, no cuddling, no kissing, slowly becoming more and more distant. Her eating constantly changed and she was terrible about it. She'd demand I get her something all day, and then the moment I give it to her, she wants something else, screaming at me. Okay, again, hormonal issues. I get it, no problem. She never let me go to any appointments, no groups she went to, spent more time away, became cold and bitter, constantly angry at me. This went on for months. Slapped me a couple of times when I forgot one of her dozens of tasks she assigned me during the day. Stopped doing anything for the house a month into the pregnancy. Sure, she's pregnant. I get it. Moving around is hard, but she wouldn't even do laundry about 4 weeks in. And by 5 weeks, I did everything. I'm also the primary source of income. I barely sleep. I'm running on fumes. Made me sleep in the guest room. Would always try and pick fights. I never once raised my voice, my hand, or my tone. I sat there and constantly mentally reminded myself this isn't her and this would all be worth it. She didn't want me to make any baby decisions. No name, no work on the nursery, nothing. 1 month before she delivered, she yelled how fucking useless I am and how I don't do anything and that she's staying with her mother. She didn't let me get her anything, come check on her, threatened to divorce me and get a restraining order if I even called her. A couple of weeks ago back, I found about the birth of my son from a Facebook post. She posted it with her mother and some family. It fucking broke me. I tried to get to the hospital and visit. They had security kick me out. After months of outright hatred, anger, and abuse thrown at me 24/7, I fucking had it. Odds are I'm not even on the birth certificate. I opened a new account and all my deposits go there. I took half of our joint account. She never bought baby stuff ahead of time. Who knows what that money was going towards? So now that she has to buy supplies for our son, she's used up every cent. I've gotten a lawyer. The house is mine. I'm the only one who spent money on it anyway. I've sent the rest of her stuff to her mother's house. I'm demanding a paternity test. I'm not spending another damn cent until I get verification it's my son. I'm absolutely divorcing her. She chose the stay-at-home life. If she cheated, she's screwed. Her mother has money for a couple of weeks' stay, not even close enough for full-time support. If he is my son, I will absolutely be getting my right as a father for a relationship. The last week, my STBX called. I just don't know what that means. She's practically hyperventilating. She wanted to come home. She was crying about how it was all a mistake. She's not staying with her mother. She's at a friend's house. She wants to come home. She wants our son to have his father. I told her, I don't fucking believe he's my son. Why the fuck would she pull this shit if he is? Show me a paternity test and I'll do everything I can for him and him only. She wants to meet tomorrow at a park so I can talk to her. I said, sure, so I can finally say everything I should have said months ago to her face. My parents are hoping we can make up, but they absolutely understand if I won't. My brother is a deadbeat jackass, so I don't care what he has to say. but my sister thinks I should at least hear her out. Right. Briefly going to search for STBX. What the hell does that mean? Keeps in never content, can't find the acronym. Soon to be X. Okay. That's my guess. So, all right. Will this be the quick one that I was looking for? Probably not. So, where would you start with something like this? Obviously, the place that I would normally start is who's the person right in front of me, and that is this particular person who has apparently been pushed to breaking point by a wife who has become quite controlling and abusive post getting pregnant, right? So I would look at that and just sort of go, no, you are never expected to just be in a relationship with somebody who literally physically assaults you, constantly picks fights with you, and that kind of thing. Now, I'm aware that I only have one side of the story. So there's a complete other side of the story that we're missing. But in psychology, generally speaking, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop. That doesn't matter. I take the side that is given to me, and that's what's important here. So, yeah, when it comes to some of this stuff, obviously they're wrong. The house is mine. I'm the only one that spent money on it. That's just not how any of this stuff works. Because he says, my soon-to-be ex-wife and I have wanted kids for years, which indicates that they have had a multi-year relationship, and I don't know of any Western country in the world where she doesn't own half your house. So good luck with that, buddy. When it comes to what he has seen, and this is where I think probably where would I start on something like this? I'd actually start where he starts, which is the history of both. You know, we don't know what her history is prior to. We're just sort of told that her father was never involved in her life. We then have his side, which is essentially that he's not had particularly great experiences either with fathers, and that sort of has formed his thing of, I'm going to be this best ever, right? There's a few problems with that, but the one that I would start with is he decided when he was going to be the best ever, that the best ever meant no boundaries, right? And that is a problem that I actually see very frequently, be it relationships, friendships, you name it. People decide that to be the best friend, wife, husband, whatever, they have to sacrifice their boundaries to do it and put up with things as if somehow that's the price to pay of a good relationship, etc., without realizing that, and I can't say this too clearly, boundaries are what makes relationships work. They do not work without it. And this is like a poster child example. If you are willing to sacrifice your boundaries for somebody, you get into that thing of, there's that joke about, I think it's Charlie, no, one of the Marx brothers, who says something on the lines of, I don't want to be a member of any club that would accept me as a member. You know, that sounds like a joke until you get this, which is essentially, I don't want to be with anybody who disrespects themselves to this degree for me, right? It actually can do a reverse where it breeds contempt. It's like, you clearly care about your boundaries so little, I can treat you like whatever I want, and you're just going to come back. In Australia, particularly in prison culture, we have a word for that called dog. And it's the one thing that will probably get you stabbed in Ipswich if you call somebody a dog, because the idea of it is somebody who is, it doesn't matter how much you kick it or abuse it, it always comes crawling back, right? Generally speaking, we do not have respect for these people in our lives, and that's actually what we see here, right? So this person is basically saying, I didn't contribute anything, and I understand where they're coming from, but what they did is they disrespected themselves, and then the other person disrespected them because they disrespected themselves, right? They let boundaries slide for months, getting to the point of physical violence, and they're still not asserting a boundary. And I sit here going, I understand why you would do this for love, but I want everybody to understand that this is what happens when you don't hold boundaries. You end up essentially with the contempt of the other person. And so that is a major contributor to this scenario, right? And if you were to learn something from this scenario, it would be in having the best relationship with anybody must include healthy boundaries. Do not sacrifice healthy boundaries to get whatever, because that always backfires, right? And here we see it, right? What actually happens here? The point at which he essentially, she moves out, then he asserts himself, finally, takes half the money, says, right, do your own life. The boundary finally gets reinforced, and what do we see? She wants to come home. I promise you, that's not an accident. He finally respects himself, and she's like, oh, you're somebody that respects yourself. That's attractive to me, right? This is not how humans think, right? Generally speaking, when they're in these situations, they do the things that we've watched in front of us. And yet, when you sit back from the outside and you get to watch this again and again and again, you look at it and basically say, this was completely avoidable with some good boundaries that didn't get stepped all over, you know? So, yeah, and it's just like you can see the escalation. This is, if you wanted a different thing to take from something like this, if you want to see an escalation of domestic violence over time, right, it's literally this. It's like, oh, okay, withholding of sex and stuff like that. That seems there. Withholding of intimacy completely, and it's probably, my guess is, or very often, let's say, let's not guess about this scenario. Very often, intimacy and touch becomes a reward for doing what I wanted you to do, rather than just a normal part of a healthy relationship. Becomes more and more demanding, and then the demands change. As soon as you fix the problem, it becomes a different problem, right? You know, isolating yourself, withdrawing, not allowing information essentially about that, increasingly becoming distant, escalating to kicking him out into the guest room, constant criticism and belittling, you know, essentially withheld from any contributions towards his own child, yelling and screaming. And I swear in here that she physically hit him at least one point from what was reported, yet slapped me a couple of times when I forgot tasks. This is the fairly typical escalation. And my guess is this happens like fairly sequentially over a long period of time. You know, if you wanted a very, very good picture, as something that I have seen a lot of times, for both men and women, this is how domestic violence escalates. And people often sort of go, oh, yeah, but like, surely, you know, you could do something about this. And it's like, this was a slow escalation. And if you look at the way this person minimizes it, they basically, oh, it's like a couple of times. As if somehow the number of times is important. It's irrelevant. Physical violence does not belong in relationships, right? Unless it's between two consenting adults, blah, blah, blah. There are some circumstances, I guess, but we're talking this kind of clearly non-consensual physical violence does not belong. So, you know, yeah, we then end up with this situation. This is fairly common, actually, as much as it's often disappointing, common situation where somebody comes to a very quick realization of, yeah, I've stuffed up. What can I do to fix that? And very often the damage is essentially done. Like you see here, I'll do everything I can for my son and him only, assuming he is in fact the son. Clearly this person has like a picture in their head that she couldn't have done this to me if this is my child, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And the answer is she could have. That's entirely possible under the circumstances. So, yeah, I think there's that sort of grace of meeting up and talking at a park. You know, he doesn't have to do that. I would always advise, if you do this sort of a thing, record it if your state and territory laws allow for you to do so. You know, would you say this? I promise you, this is something which I've worked with a lot of people who want to do this. I want to be able to say it. It never works. This is the most thankless experience you'll have in your life. It just doesn't work when you sit with somebody, because we've got this picture in our minds of somebody sitting and just listening, and it just never works like that. So, good luck to him. But this is like, I say, at the end of the day, I personally have never seen vengeance work in the lives of any of my clients. In the long term, usually there's a brief blip of feeling, but ultimately they just sometimes people actually cross their own values, and then they just end up in a worse position because in trying to get that, yes moment across their own values, and now they feel guilty about it. I can promise you it's not worth it. It really isn't. The only part of this that stands out a little bit is clearly there is a brother chirping away in the background. Where is it? Brother put kind of is not the most in, and then he pops up again at the end. Brother's a deadbeat jackass. I don't care what he has to say. It's interesting. So just one of those details. But yeah, fairly common escalation. This is actually how domestic violence, generally speaking, works. I think it's a pretty good picture of the escalation that happens over time. The actual reason, if this is sort of like, so he says postpartum wife, none of this is actually postpartum. And I'm not even convinced that there's a great deal of mental health in there. Personally, if I was drawn to an aspect of this from her side, I'd be looking at, does she not have any idea how to cope with the idea that her child's her child is going to be raised in a atmosphere that she herself does not understand. So essentially, is this like almost a self-sabotagey, but children are meant to be raised with only their mum. How do I get this guy out of the picture? Because I don't understand what a relationship would look like with a mum and a dad in it, because I've never experienced that. And that's terrifying to me, So these sorts of things can happen, and where the self-sabotage kicks in, which she might not even be aware of, to sort of go, maybe if I ostracize him and kick him out, then I get to raise this kid. And then this kid will have the experience that I had, because my experience was great. And I never had a dad. So how do we replicate that? Without insight, people do these things fairly commonly. So let's finish up there. Mainly in the interest of time, I do have to finish up, but that's quite an interesting one. So let's finish up. I will catch people a different time. I will hopefully get this up before too long. All right. Take care, everybody. I shall catch you another time. See you.